Ajit sir, we can begin now.
Thank you. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you from wherever you're joining. Welcome to this webinar on political financing. As you know, this is a very important topic. My name is Ajit Ranade, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm a co-founder and trustee of the Association for Democratic Reforms, which is hosting the webinar. I might begin by saying that on December 9 and 10, which is just day after tomorrow, the US President, Mr. Joe Biden, will host a virtual summit for democracy, which will bring together leaders of 100 countries, civil society, private sector representatives, to set forth an affirmative agenda for democratic renewal and to tackle the greatest threats faced by democracies today through collective action. So our seminar or webinar today is actually in that context. Let me say a few things about our partner, International IDEA, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. That's IDEA. Is also holding a multi-stakeholder convening a multi-stakeholder coalition for partners in democracy in a virtual global coalition for democracy forum. And the purpose of this forum is to galvanize global conversations on democracy as like today. And these are going to be inputs to the summit I just mentioned, which is going to be held on the 9th and 10th of December. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also likely to participate in the summit. And the forum, like today, seeks to provide a platform for voices, actors, and issues that may not be part of the official summit, but will also thereby contribute to the broadening of conversations for the summit. And the occasion of the summit provides a window of opportunity for democracy community worldwide to come together to advance global conversations on democracy and raise public awareness of the value of democracy and place issues in the public agenda. On the public agenda, and to learn from each other. I might also mention that the Association for Democratic Reforms, ADR, also organized a webinar on the occasion of the International Day of Democracy, which was 15th September 2021, two months ago, on the topic of role of citizens in improving the future of Indian democracy. And the idea of this webinar was mooted by Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, who's a former Chief Election Commissioner of India, and is also a member of Board of Advisors for IDEA, our partner for today. So with that background, let me just quickly spend 1 or 2 minutes on the topic for today. Political funding is necessary component for political parties to play their active role in the democratic process. But transparency and openness of this financing of political parties is the cornerstone of a well-functioning and healthy democracy. It's the cornerstone, transparency, and openness in political financing. And absence of disclosure of sources from party funds, we believe facilitates corruption and gives rise to all kinds of real or imagined quid pro quo between donors and politicians. And if there are countries where parties are too dependent on such opaque funding, policy decisions become questionable. And the level playing field in a democracy or democratic field becomes imbalanced if one or two parties have disproportionate stranglehold or control of political funding or campaign finance. The issue of transparency of campaign finance is actually a global one, and many democracies are struggling with it. In the case of India, recent political finance reforms have done not much, have done very little to make parties accountable for the money they receive, and instead seem to have legitimized opacity, not transparency. So the objective of today's webinar is to look into all these issues and how can we reduce the influence of money power on elections, on democratic functioning, and what are the solutions? How can we improve the situation? So I'm very pleased and to welcome a very illustrious panel that we have. Let me just quickly tell you their names, and I will introduce them one by one when they come to speak. We have Ms. Khushbu Agrawal, Program Officer, at International IDEA. Then we have Professor Rajeev Gowda, who's the national spokesperson for the All India Congress Committee, for the Congress, and he's a member of the All India Congress Committee, former member of Parliament. Mr. J.S. Saharia, who is the chairman of the International Society for Human Awakening and Development, and also former chief secretary of the state of Maharashtra and former state election commissioner for the state of Maharashtra. Then we have Professor Rahul Verma, who is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research and a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Ashoka University. Then we have Mr. Manish Chibar, a consulting editor with India Ahead News. He was editor at the print. And we also have Mr. Prashant Bhushan, well-known lawyer of the Supreme Court. So as I said, I'll introduce each one of them. The sequence will be Ms. Khushbu Agrawal will go first, then Professor Rajeev Gowda, then Mr. Prashant Bhushan, then Mr. Saharia, then Mr. Rahul Verma, and we will conclude with Mr. Manish Chibar, and then we'll have an open discussion. I'm requesting panelists in ahead to please confine their comments to preferably 10 to 12 minutes, so we have some time for open discussion. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker, first panelist, Khushbu Agrawal. Her research and work on political finance and influence of money in politics has been extensive, and this is aimed to achieving inclusive and responsible accountable institutions. She has worked at the International Regional Office for Latin America and Caribbean in Santiago, Chile. I'm not going to give you the whole detailed resume, but I should mention that she's also worked at the IDEA's office in Nepal. She's worked in many areas, gender, peace and conflict, and so on. She holds a master's degree in public policy from the Australian National University, and she was awarded the Canadian government's federal scholarship to participate in the Global Change Leaders. So welcome, Ms. Khushbu, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajit and ADR for co-hosting this together with International IDEA. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And depending on where you are tuning in from, I am Khushbu, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here together with this esteemed panel and the session organized by ADR together with International IDEA in the lead up to the Summit for Democracy, which is, as Dr. Ajit pointed out, to be held later in the week on 9th and 10th of December. A little bit brief about International IDEA. It is an intergovernmental organization with 34 member states from around the world, India being one of them. The Institute supports sustainable democracies worldwide, and we work on issues ranging from constitution building support, parliamentary strengthening, electoral processes, political participation and representation, among others. Our work also focuses on the issue of money in politics, where we conduct extensive research and produce knowledge products on emerging issues related to money in politics. We also provide technical assistance and advisory services to our partners, and we convene spaces of dialogue such as these that we are doing today to share experiences and learn from each other. We also manage an exhaustive political finance database, which I invite you to access through our website, www.idea.int. The database provides information on political finance regulations in 180 countries on 58 questions across 4 pillars of political finance. So the topic of today, obviously, as Dr. Ajit already pointed out, it couldn't be more relevant to the issues that are at the helm of the Summit for Democracy. During my intervention today, I will provide a very quick global overview and trends in relation to political finances and some good practices that could be relevant to India. Please bear that I will not be speaking very extensively on the Indian experience or the regulations happening in the country, because we have an illustrious panel who are more aware and more knowledgeable and have lived that reality in the country. But I'll be giving more of a global overview with some, obviously, instances of what's happening in India and how these issues could be relevant to the country. And I just want to reiterate what Dr. Ajit was mentioning, that the first thing that we need to note when we talk about political finance is that money does not necessarily have a negative connotation in politics always. In fact, as we all know, money is a very important and necessary component for any democracy to enable political participation and representation. However, the problem is that it needs regulation, because if not effectively regulated, it could ultimately undermine the integrity of political processes and institutions, which can result in corruption. And again, when we talk about corruption, corruption can take many different forms, but inadequately controlled funding of political parties and election campaigns is one of the most widely exploited entry points for narrow private interests to exert undue influence over politics. And this is the reason that we need transparency in the funding of campaigns, in funding of political parties and politics. And this is at the heart of the anti-corruption agenda at the global, regional, as well as national levels. At the global level, I could say the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption is perhaps the clearest example. At the regional level, a number of organizations are leading the way by setting guidelines and peer review mechanisms, such as the Council of Europe's a group of states against corruption. And finally, at the national level, many countries around the globe have taken up the issue of this reform agenda, including most recently in South Africa, Mongolia, Panama, and in fact, even in India, reforms have been undergoing. Of course, there are critiques which our panelists will eventually talk about, I'm sure. In fact, when we talk about national levels, regulatory mechanisms, almost all countries in the world have some sort of laws relating to the funding of political parties and election campaigns. The fundamental pillars of political finance regulatory framework are often related to regulations of private donations, example, bans on foreign donations or corporate donations, anonymous donations, putting of donation caps, etc., provision of public funding, regulations of spending, for example, spending limits or third-party spending, online campaign spending, etc., and reporting oversights and sanctions. Several legislative shortcomings and emerging challenges exist in many countries, despite the fact that regulations are present, but they are not necessarily always robust. And here I should also point out that actually there is not any one size fits all when it comes to political finance regulations, because every country context is different, every country is different, and what can work in one country will not necessarily work in others. So so whatever I'm talking about today and whatever recommendations I will eventually provide needs to be analyzed from a country context, whether these are relevant to the Indian context and whether they're applicable to the Indian context, because what could have worked in the UK will not necessarily work in India. But just to start, one of the issues that often is talked about in political finance conversations is obviously the issues of sources of political funding, particularly from corporations, foreign interests, as well as anonymous donations. And I know the issues of corporate donations is big on the agenda in Indian political finance discourse. So whether corporations should be allowed to make donations to political parties, it has been debated a lot. So while those in favor say that it is a matter of freedom of political expression, free association, whereas those arguing against arguing that banning corporate donations helps to restrict undue influence of corporate interest in politics, or a scenario of quid pro quo, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So if I have to give you a global overview, as per our political finance database, as of 2020, 71% of the countries around the world allow corporations to make donations to political parties and candidates. So it's not an exception that corporations are making donations to political parties in several countries. In fact, 128 countries of the 180 allow donations. However, to reduce the influence of wealthy benefactors, particularly in relation to election campaigns, some country put specific limits on the maximum size of donations in relation to election campaigns. So that's how the influence of a small number of donors and big donors can be minimized. For example, 41 countries, including in our database, limit the size of donations that corporations can make to political parties, including in Argentina, Japan, and Kenya. And these donation limits could be in the form of an absolute number, or it could be tied to the spending limit, or it could be tied to the profits of the company. Similarly, it's the donations from foreign interests or any kind of foreign sources is also a very contested issue. But in fact, it has been banned in several countries, in 124 countries around the world. Foreign donations are for political parties are actually completely banned. So in case of India, for example, foreign donations are in principle banned, but the change in the definition of a foreign company has had some negative implications. Another issue surrounding transparency of political finance is the issue of anonymous donations. And in many countries, actually, anonymous donations are entirely banned. In some countries, they are banned only for a certain amount. In India as well, I have found that they are banned for a certain denomination, but not completely banned. And in 99 countries, actually, they've banned all sorts of anonymous donations, including in United Kingdom and Norway, for example. You cannot donate any, even $5 or £5 without actually declaring it. So that's something that we can take forward as we move this discussion. So this was more about the donation limits. Then another issue that normally when we talk about transparency of political finance, we also talk about the spending regulations. And there are many countries that actually have limits on spending. So why do we need limits on spending? Because we're always already talking about contribution limits. So there is an argument that both contribution and spending limits are useful for reducing the advantages of those with greater access to financial resources or have financial muscle power. So although contribution limits are generally considered more effective, but spending actually is easier to monitor. According to International Ideas database, 35% of the countries impose some limits on political parties spending either annually or related to elections. And the number of countries that have actually imposed spending limits has steadily increased since 2012. In 2012, there were 28% of the countries imposing those limits, and now it has increased to 35%. So there seems to be a value in imposing these limits. It also helps in leveling the playing field. And again, you will hear later from other speakers, but the rising cost of election campaigning in India has affected smaller parties disproportionately. The larger parties with more financial resources are able to spend considerably amount on their election campaigns, especially on advertising, and this leads to an uneven electoral playing field. And given the fact that you can spend as much amount, political parties particularly, because there are spending limits for candidates, but the fact that political parties can spend exorbitant sums of money, new or smaller parties find it extremely difficult to compete against larger parties. So this really creates an unfair playing field. And when we talk about spending, there are again two emerging areas that need attention at the global level, but also at the national level. The first issue is the regulation of campaign-related spending by third parties. So what are third parties? They are neither political parties nor candidates, but typically take the form of, let's say, independent foundations and interest groups. So many countries actually struggle to define and regulate third-party campaigning, and therefore prevent the rechanneling of election spending through such non-party campaigns. And 31% countries actually limit the amount third parties can spend on election campaign activities. So it is one thing to require third parties to report on the amount they have spent on behalf of political parties or candidates, and it's another thing to actually include, require or limit the amount of money that they can spend, because now, especially with online campaigning that is happening on Facebook or through Google or through any other social media channels, it's very easy to actually hire a third party PR agency, for instance, who can actually run an entire campaign on India, but not be required to comply with any set limit. So this is quite a new emerging issue that is that we see across the globe right now. And actually, we are currently doing some in-depth study in the UK market as well. Hopefully, we will be able to share the findings next year. But as of now, only 7% of the countries worldwide regulate how political actors, including parties, candidates, and third-party campaigners, can spend money online. And some of these countries are Argentina, Canada, Panama, Mexico, Romania, etc.
Okay.
So now I will try to be brief. I think I'm taking a lot of time, but of course there'll be room for some questions. But regulations are only useful as much as their compliance is, as much as there is oversight and the oversight agency ensures that there is compliance. So there has to be timely reporting, there has to be timely auditing, disclosure, public scrutiny, and there should be sanction mechanisms. And in most countries around the world, EMBs have been given the task to do public political finance oversight. However, to be able to do their task, the EMBs require not just human and financial resources, but also the mandate, the power, and the capacity to do that. And then, in addition to the oversight agencies, often public scrutiny also plays a very important role, and how that can be done is through media monitoring and through CSOs. For example, in the US, Center for Responsive Politics provides comprehensive information on many aspects of political donations. And actually, our organizer for today, ADR, is doing a remarkable job in scrutiny of political finance in the country. So again, just to conclude, I had some things to say, but I think I'll reserve it for later for the discussion. But what what we want to emphasize at IDEA is regulations are great, and in fact, we work a lot on regulations. But in fact, what is really important is effective implementation of existing political finance regulations, because too many regulations or too much regulations are actually counterproductive. So, for example, you could have a very exhaustive sanctions regime, but if the sanctions are actually not applied, which seems to be the case in India, they're actually not going to support. And oversight agencies need clear mandate, legal power, sufficient capacities, and there should be an environment for the CSOs to thrive, to be able to question, to be able to review the reports. The reports have to be available online, and by being available online, not just in PDF, but really have a digital disclosure of how political parties are receiving money, spending money, for public to be able to really do a close scrutiny of where the money is coming from, where the money is going, and what are the sanctions that are being applied if they are violating any norms of political finance. So
All
by
right.
this, I conclude my presentation for today. But of course, I remain available for any questions or comments from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khushbu. Thank you very much. I know, since we have to accommodate all the speakers, the time is a bit short, but we'll make the best of it. And thank you for emphasizing that it's just rules and regulations is not enough. Unless you implement them, enforce them, have sanctions, then they don't make sense. Also, thank you for highlighting the issue of the third party. In India also, while there are some regulations, there's unlimited spending by certain quarters. So it's and even other countries are facing the problem of what they call dark finance, dark areas. So we'll quickly move on to the next speaker. I'm requesting everybody to be on mute while the others speak, because I think the sound may be better. So the next speaker is Professor Rajeev Gowda. He is actually, I would request everybody to go to his website, rajeevgowda.in, because his resume is really very long and impressive. He is a former, of course, professor from IIM Bangalore, a PhD from Wharton Business School. He calls himself quizzer extraordinaire. But more importantly, he has been a member of parliament, and he is a national spokesperson for one of India's national political parties, the All India Congress Party. And he also now currently is the chairman of the All India Congress Committee Research Department. There are many other things that I could have mentioned about Professor Rajiv Gowda, but I think more importantly, we'd like to listen to him. So over to you, Professor Gowda.
Thank you so much, Ajit and ADR, for inviting me to this panel discussion webinar on a topic that is never going to be stale. Democracy is an activity, an enterprise that needs constant engagement and constant monitoring to make sure that our ideals are actually translated into reality. So far, we've had Khushbu Agrawal giving us sort of a global perspective and focusing on one crucial dimension, especially, which is whether the rules and regulations that we come up with are actually implementable. And some of you have seen my work with Sridharan from 2012 on on Indian political party financing and election expenditure reforms, which showed or demonstrated how hollow and counterproductive India's regulations are. They're very well intentioned, but you get pretty much the exact opposite result. And now to proceed with, if I can request the team to move towards showing my presentation, um, I will be moving fairly rapidly on, like a T20 cricket match. Can we have the presentation, please? Should I share my version of it?
No, I think we have it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have it. Yeah. So anyway, the basic bottom line is, if you look at ADR's opening video, which was, again, overflowing with idealism, the unfortunate reality in India is pretty much, the exact opposite. And this is something that I have been able to see from fairly close quarters, both as an academic looking at all this and also as a political practitioner in the field. I still actually don't see the presentation. Anas, can you load it, please? So I'll keep talking while we're waiting for this to come up.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. The basic challenge is that we keep wanting an ideal situation, but the actual reality is very different. Anyway, before just let me know, should I just share my version of this?
Anas, are you able to project his presentation? Nandini?
Anas, are you able to do so?
Yes, it's up here. Okay.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We professors are PowerPoint. What's the term? Yeah, power corrupts. PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. So we guys are very used to using presentations. Nonetheless, here we go. Now it's disappeared once again. But the basic first slide essentially said at the bottom that these views are personal and do not represent the official party line. Okay, let me clarify that. Next, going on. Yeah. So I'm going to start by talking about something that's going on right now. Okay. In some states of India, there are legislative councils, and there's an election going on right now from something called local authorities constituencies. The Panchayati Raj institution members elect legislators. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. And now I'll show you some newspaper headlines from Karnataka. Okay, so this is, please. Yeah, can you use page up, page down rather than scroll? Okay, just see what works. As long as you can show something, that's fine. Okay, so basically, this is a headline from a couple of days ago, which says 22nd November, which says it's polls for money bags. Karnataka MLC candidates need rupees 20 to 30 crores, right? No matter which party they belong to, BJP, Congress, or JDS, all candidates have deep pockets. And when you look at the bottom, a couple of lines here, what shall we say? This is an election where the voters are mostly elected members of Gram Panchayats and elected local bodies, and the going rate is rupees 15,000 to 20,000 per vote. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is a newspaper report, right? Next. Okay, so next, please.
No, don't scroll. Just do page down. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do move. This is a power play in a T20 match, Anas. So let's keep moving very rapidly. I have more slides than the time available. Okay, So here, the same story is amended with numbers reaching 1 lakh for each vote, right? So that's where that money is going, and that's why people are looking for deep-pocketed candidates. Now, on the right side of this page, just if you look at the last two paragraphs, many politicians believe the preferential voting system in these elections is the reason for this trend. Okay, so if we think that fixing the electoral process is going to change the game, well, in every election process there is scope for extraction, there's scope for corruption, whatever the case may be. And the last line is a clincher: the growing price for votes has forced parties to field candidates who are resourceful. Okay, next, please. So basically, what is resourceful? Someone with wonderful ideas to transform the country, or resourceful in terms of having deep pockets? And this latter part is pretty much what's happened. And so when you say candidates are becoming Karodpati is old history. Now, if you're not a US dollar billionaire or something like that, you're surely would be trying to play the game. It's become something like that in today's Indian political system. Now, I mean, look, many of these Karodpatis, resourceful people, are very successful entrepreneurs in different fields. I'm not taking credit away from their successes, but the basic point is, if parties will choose only those candidates who can spend mega bucks, then what happens to others who have something else to contribute, some other track record that's interesting and useful to the nation? That's one of the questions that arises. Now, the next slide basically says what happened with this. No. Please go back. Sorry, the one about Mumbai. Yeah, the previous slide. Yeah. So this is a story from Mumbai where a similar election was taking place, and what ended up happening was a combination of two factors led to multiple of these elections becoming unopposed. Right. So the numbers in Mumbai were such that the ruling coalition and the BJP were going to get one seat each. So they decided, let's just not put up additional candidates, and it became an unopposed election. Similar, in Kolhapur, in Dhule Nandarbar, maybe something similar happened. But one of the other features that can happen in these sorts of elections is that people may say, look, we're up against a candidate who is so resourceful that we won't be able to match the spending, and therefore let's just withdraw from the contest itself. Okay, so basically what we're seeing now, I'm just giving you this example because this is something that's going on in this country. It's a very special instance, and the rest of my speech presentation has nothing to do with all of these, except to point out that you end up selecting a certain kind of candidate. There's vote buying, and there are possibly lopsided outcomes where there is even no contest, right? So there's a lesson from this ongoing activity. Elections are actually on December 10th, but these are already going on. Next, please. Okay. So if you want to fix this, right, and we want to address the issue of transparency and accountability and things like that, what did my old friend, the late Mr. Arun Jaitley, come up with? He took all these terms and decided to, turn them on their head, and came up with this extraordinary concept called electoral bond, right? And this is apparently what one looks like. I haven't actually held one in my hand, but this is what they look like. Nonetheless, the basic thing is, electoral bonds violate every standard that we want to apply to political financing. Are they transparent? Absolutely not. Okay, they are like bearer bonds, and they can be donated to political parties, and the parties will not know who actually bought the bond because it's an instrument in of itself. Second, the argument was made that because they are routed through the State Bank of India, they represent white money. And in India, there's a big problem with black money in politics. And I lived through demonetization. A lot of black money was converted to white. So this whole notion that anything that comes through the banking system is white is something that I find very difficult to believe. And the third test is what's called the level playing field test, right? We want to know whether there's a level playing field or only one, possibly the ruling party, benefits from such an innovation. And and basically, the SBI is under the government, and if you with a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you might be able to get an understanding of who's contributing to whom, right? And next, please. Next, yeah, yeah. And so, while I mean, this is just a cartoon which says, these are when you compare with cryptocurrency, which the government's trying to, regulate. Well, this is even worse. You can't even trace, except the SBI. Nobody else knows who contributed to whom. We possibly need to start doing some forensic research into corporate, annual reports to figure out who generated these. Nonetheless, the the quid pro quo concern that we have, right? Who contributed to whom and for what result? That is not visible to us anymore. And as citizens, that's a huge loss in democracy. Next, please. Next, yeah. And okay, let's just stick to the line in bold. In 2019-20, the BJP, the ruling party, got 75% of the total electoral bonds sold. The Congress got 9%. Okay, and practically all these bonds were in the denominations of 10 lakh and 1 crore, meaning they were not bought by the man on the street or the woman on the street. They were bought by resourceful interests. Okay. And between 2018 and 19, just around 8,000 crores were sold. Remember these numbers: 8,000 crores electoral bonds. The magnitude of expenditure is much larger. Next, please. Yeah, and then there are other mechanisms through which companies, sort of route funding to political parties. There's something called electoral trusts, and there was a recent tweet saying one particular trust, Prudent Electoral Trust, it had 245 crores, 209 went to the BJP, 2 to the Congress, 34 to other regional parties, and out of that, this has Airtel and other companies in there, but 100 crores came from a company that's in the lottery business. Okay, next. Okay, so what you can see in both these numbers is a very, very high proportion goes to the ruling party. Okay, and some small change goes to other parties. Next, please. Yeah. Now, one particular estimate of the last Lok Sabha election expenditure overall is 60,000 crores, right? This is Center for Media Studies. You can argue with whether their estimates are under or overestimates, but the fact is they've come out with some numbers, right? Continue, please. Yes. Next. And according to them, the BJP spent 27,000 crores. About half the overall expense was by the ruling party, which, as a result, got more than half the seats in parliament as well. Next, yeah. So when you start looking at all these things, right, reforms, election expenditures, has much changed? Has much not changed? Well, a lot has, and that's the point. The playing field is getting more and more uneven, especially because the ruling party is not at all shy about using the enforcement directorate, the income tax department, etc., to either coax donors or to punish donors who threaten to donate money to other political parties. Okay, so it's very, very dangerous environment we're in right now in terms of overall political funding. Next, please. So what fixes can we come up with, right? Well, the first one, next, is to get the Election Commission of India to fight vote buying, right? Right now, the way the laws are written, the Election Commission goes after overt expenditures, which are supposed to be below 70 lakh limit for a cap for Lok Sabha elections, when actually people are spending 20, 30 times that amount underground. And the EC goes after these overt expenditures and doesn't do much in terms of going after the actual vote buying, which is corrupting democracy at its very core. And one way to get the EC to stop worrying about this is to just remove electoral expenditure limits. I had moved a private member bill in the Rajya Sabha on this topic, Not that I want insane expenditures, but I just want attention to where it's needed, to the criminal practice of vote buying, rather than the festival of democracy, which is open election expenditure. Okay. And if there is transparency, then those who can raise money openly can spend it openly as well. The current system rewards those with black money and the networks to distribute it. Next, please. Okay. This is the larger solution that I have to offer, which is about public funding of elections, right? Now, of course, immediately people are going to say, oh, people are already spending so much and now you want the exchequer to spend so much more. Well, the basic logic for this is people can spend how much ever they want. But in order to have a competitive electoral process, every candidate who is serious needs to run a campaign which spends a certain threshold level of resources. Okay? Only then do people take you seriously. And that is not the current limit. You need to spend much more than that. And all I'm saying is, if you can allow these parties or even individual candidates to raise money through some public mechanism, then they can, compete, with parties that may have 10 times, orders of magnitude more money. And this can, in my view, improve electoral processes. Public funding is something that many other parts of the world have been experimenting with. Next, please. Next, Anas. Yeah. So how do you come up with something like this? We need eligibility thresholds, allocation criteria, and I would rather focus on incentives, meaning offer matching funds for people who can raise small contributions from a large number of people. Of course, each of these can also be rigged, because you can put your own, give money to all your party people and say this is what was contributed. All sorts of stuff can happen. But I also want to create a playing field for independent candidates to also come in. So we'll have to brainstorm further, not tonight, but maybe later, on public funding. Possibly request ADR to do a separate event on the whole theme. Next, please. Yeah. So what I suggest is, let's set up a national education election fund. Okay. And let the ECI operate it with parliamentary oversight. And Yogendra Yadav and others had suggested that you give political parties, after an election, you give them 100 rupee per vote that they garnered. And this, of course, is biased against new parties or new candidates, but nonetheless, it provides enough of a threshold of resources for competition. And or, as I mentioned, as matching grants for collecting small donations and demonstrating grassroots support. Or you can provide, instead of these electoral bonds, give each voter 100 rupees. Let a voter decide who to select as a candidate and who to back. Of course, this can also result in all kinds of extortion on the ground, but these are possibilities, right? Or some combination of the above. Next, please. And now, chronology, samajh lijiye, as our famous Home Minister said. Once parties start collecting public funding, then there are entities that will come under RTI and CAG audits, and you can enforce regulations on internal democracy. So, until then, we all, speaking for a party, basically say, hey, you don't give us anything or not enough to treat us as a public entity that should be under RTI. Anyway, now you say, what about the costs? Well, we keep hearing that we're going to be a $5 trillion economy day after tomorrow or something like that. So maybe this is a small amount in that larger scale. Next. Next.
3-4 minutes more, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
I'm pretty much done. If the slides can move fast, I can finish fast. Anyway, the basic point is, CMS said 60,000 crores were spent on the Lok Sabha election. If you say a similar amount is spent on all Vidhan Sabha elections over a 5-year period, then it's like 1,20,000 crores. Oops, not 120,000, but 1,20,000 crores over a 5-year period, which means annual expenditure of about 24,000 crores, which is less than 1% of our budget, which is, the last time I checked, was about 35 lakh crore, right? So the amounts are actually not, humongous beyond belief. They're actually, manageable if we have the intention. Next, please. Yeah, and if you think about how much revenue we just gave up by slashing corporate tax rates, 1.4 like 45 lakh crore per year. Where's 24,000? Where's 1.45 lakh crores? Right? Well, I mean, I shouldn't be comparing with any of the rest, so I'll skip. But I'm just saying these numbers are not that small, are not that big. Next, please. But remember this, right? Public funding resolves a massive free rider problem. If you ask any citizen in India, they say we want cleaner politics, right? Citizens say that. Cleaner politics requires citizens to contribute funds to parties or ideas or time or energy, that sort of thing. And very few citizens engage either to contribute anything at all, forget funds, anything at all, right? So there's a massive free rider problem. When you want to resolve these sorts of free rider problems, if you want to achieve that goal, which they all expressly come up with, which is cleaner politics, you know, then let's use the taxes that they pay. That's where public funding comes in. Next. Sorry, a few days in Delhi and I've come back with a terrible throat. Anyway, and basically, some of the other advantages of this, right? If you're providing a matching grant to parties that move towards more transparent regimes, which they bring in smaller, non-anonymous donations, you direct this money at the grassroots level, you actually transform in inner party democracy, you strengthen local party units, improve transparency, and give a chance for genuine more public service motivated people rather than crooks and criminals to dominate within political parties. Okay, that's it really. Next. Yeah, I've written about all this and we can talk more today and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gowda. Thank you very much. And you made a strong pitch for public funding. You also said that you moved a private member's bill. Some of us in the so-called NGO sector, we grappled with this idea, and we felt that allowing political parties to spend public money for public funding is not going to stop them from what they're doing now. So we felt unless we have strong reforms which curtails the opacity and makes the current regime more transparent, allowing them access to public funds may be premature. But this is something we should discuss and debate. So I'm going to go straight to our next speaker, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, who's one of India's most eminent lawyers. And he is, of course, known for his, what should I say, activism. He is a public interest lawyer in the Supreme Court of India. He was a member of the India Against Corruption movement a few years back. And he is also one of the founders of Swaraj Abhiyan and Sadbhavna and Institute of Public Policy and Politics. His main areas of interest have been in human rights, in environmental protection, in accountability of public servants. He is currently a convener of the working committee for the campaign for judicial accountability and judicial reforms. Mr. Prashant, I know that this is inadequate introduction to you, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to come and go and welcome you. Welcome to Mr. Prashant Bhushan. Over to you. And requesting you to keep your comments to 10 to 12 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit. I think your introduction was overextensive. I must congratulate ADR for organizing this webinar on a very, very important issue of political funding. I must also say that I benefited greatly from hearing the views of Khushbu as well as Rajeev Gowda ji. So let me start by saying why one of the major reasons why the role of money has become so critical in elections today is because we have what is called first past the post at two levels in our system of electoral democracy. First, when we elect our candidates, the candidate who gets the largest number of votes, even if they are only 25% votes, becomes the sole representative of that constituency, even if all the other candidates put together have got more than 3 times as many votes as he has got, so long as no other candidate has got more votes than him or her. Secondly, when the government is formed, the party or the coalition which has a majority, gets the whole government, and the opposition counts for nothing in the running of the government. Therefore, when people vote, they are not merely voting for a candidate, they are also voting for a government. And they don't want to waste their votes, so they don't always vote for the candidate or the party that they consider to be the best if they feel that that candidate has no chance of winning or that party has no chance of forming the government. And therefore they assess who are the parties who have some chance of coming into government, or who are the candidates who have some chance of winning, and among those they select the least bad among them. And this assessment of which candidate or party has some chance of winning is made largely on the basis of their visibility. And visibility is largely a function of the money that you spend in your elections, because with money you can have advertising, newspapers, electronic media, hoardings, posters. With money, you can also hire campaign workers who carry your hoardings and posters all over, distribute your handbills. With money, you can even organize large election rallies today, which creates this aura and impression that you are in the race. So that is why the role of money has become so important in elections. And therefore, one of the things that we need to do if we want to reduce the role of money in elections is what I consider to be proportional representation. Because in that, if a party gets 5% of the vote, it still gets 5% of the seats, and therefore you can still vote for the party or the candidate that you consider the best, because even in a proportional representation system, you can have a two-layered system whereby you cast one vote for your favorite party and one more vote for your favorite candidate within that party. So it's not that the top 5% of that party list get elected, but the top 5% who get the maximum number of individual votes within that party will get elected if that party secures 5% of the votes. So that is one reform that I feel needs to be made. Now, we have tried to limit the role of money in elections by placing a limit on the expenditure by candidates. Currently, it's about 75 lakhs in the Lok Sabha, etc. Of course, the smaller candidates from smaller political parties don't even have that 75 lakhs. And that is why the point made by Professor Gowda that we need state funding of elections becomes very important. And the formula that he suggested, 100 rupees per vote that you get, which means that a candidate who secures even 1 lakh votes will get a crore, at least returned back. He can take a loan and fight the elections, but he'll get that money when after the elections. And with 100 rupees per vote, the total public expenditure on the Lok Sabha elections, suppose 100 crore votes are cast. 100 crore votes are not cast, say 60 crore votes are cast. It's just 6,000 crores, which is minuscule compared to this figure that he mentioned of 60,000 crores being spent. It's just 10% of what is actually being spent on Lok Sabha elections in India. So that's one reform which certainly needs to be made. But the other thing is that though there is a limit on the spending by candidates, it's not enforced, as Khushbu was pointing out. There is no system of enforcing this limit. The Election Commission is hardly ever able to catch. We know that people spend, 75 lakhs. They are often spending even more than 10 crores. And even they are not caught because they give a false return of election expenses because they spend all the money in cash, or third parties spend for them, or political parties spend for them, and therefore they are never caught. Unfortunately, though there is a limit on individual candidates, there is no limit on spending by political parties. In fact, earlier the law said that if a political party spends money for you and you have tacitly uh, accepted that expenditure by the political party, it will count for your election expenses. But even that law has been amended, and now political party spending by political party is not counted into the candidate's expenditure. And as I said, there is no limit on spending by political parties. And as Rajeev Gowda pointed out, the BJP reportedly spent 25,000 crores or something like that in the last Lok Sabha elections, which makes a mockery of this limit of 75 lakhs per candidate, because if they had 500 candidates, they ought to have spent, the total expenditure by all their candidates would not even have been 500 crores. But instead of that, if they have spent 25,000 crores, that's humongous. So therefore, therefore that makes a mockery. And therefore, one of the reforms that we need to have is to have a limit on spending by political parties. Now, the next question is, how do you enforce this? Well, there are several ways. One is to have complete transparency, put parties under RTI, enforce proactive transparency in the accounts of political parties and the candidates by having a law which forces them to put everything out in the public domain within a month. But more important than that, to ensure that at least political parties and candidates spend everything and take everything. That is, all their income and expenditure must be through bank channels. When this demonetization was brought in, the Prime Minister said that one of the objects of this is to have a cashless society. Now, individuals cannot be, poor people in the country cannot be expected to have all their transactions through banks, but certainly political parties and political candidates contesting elections can be mandated to have all transactions through banking channels. And if they don't, that should be considered to be a corrupt practice, which renders them liable for disqualification. So therefore, that will be a major step towards enforcing these limits on election expenditure. Now, instead of making these kind of changes in our election laws, this government particularly brought in 3 very retrograde changes. One has already been discussed, that is these anonymous electoral bonds, which, as Professor Gowda pointed out, have gone largely to the ruling party, and mostly we can expect that a lot of them would be in the nature of kickbacks for contracts being given to those corporations. Second retrograde change was to allow unlimited corporate funding. Khushbu pointed out that in some countries, they have, in Brazil, I believe, or some South American country, I think Brazil, they have banned corporate funding. I think the Supreme Court of Brazil said corporations are not people, and therefore they cannot be funding political parties. But even if you don't ban them, the earlier law was that no corporation could give more than 15% of their net profit as political funding to political parties. But today, that limit has been completely abolished, with the result that corporations can give even more than what they earn by way of donations to political parties. The third retrograde change was to allow foreign funding. You see, we had gone to court. In fact, I think ADR was the petitioner in that, against the foreign funds received by the Congress party and the BJP. And we got an order from the High Court saying that yes, they have received foreign funding, they should be proceeded against. Now the matter went to the Supreme Court, and in between, that law was amended, the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, in order to say that, well, funds received from subsidiaries of foreign companies which are registered in India will not be considered to be foreign funds. The whole object of the FCRA was to prevent public servants, political parties, and candidates from being influenced by foreign funds, and thereby it was to stop them. Now the whole thing has been turned around by allowing, for example, if this Rafael wants to give a kickback to, or this Dassault wants to give a kickback to the BJP for this Rafael contract, all that they have to do is to give that money through a subsidiary. And if they do it through electoral bonds, then it remains anonymous. So these are very, very retrograde changes that have been made. So in my view, the solutions are at several levels. One is to ensure complete transparency of the finances of political parties and candidates by law. The law should provide that every candidate and political party would have to proactively put out on a public website all details of their income and expenditure on a monthly basis or at least on a quarterly basis. Secondly, all income and expenditure of candidates as well as political parties would have to be through banking channels. No candidate or political party will be allowed to spend anything in cash. Everything has to be through banking channels. Thirdly, there has to be a limit fixed for expenditure by political parties, and those laws about anonymous funding through electoral bonds or unlimited funding by corporations, etc., that those have to be repealed. There have to be a limit to the amount of donations that corporations can give to political parties. Then, of course, there needs to be, I agree with Professor Gowda, there needs to be state funding of elections so that there is a more level playing field in elections. The enforcement machinery has to be revamped. Enforcement is done at two levels. One is at the level of the Election Commission. One problem today, you see, for many years, the Election Commission in India was supposed to be an independent institution. But recently, especially during the BJP regime, we have seen the complete suborning of the Election Commission, and we have seen election commissioners all being brought in from Gujarat and acting in a totally partisan way. So we need to revamp the government alone controls the selection of election commissioners. This law must be changed. In fact, we have gone to court against this. We have asked for that matter is still pending in the Supreme Court, that there needs to be an independent selection committee. One model could be the Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice. But in my view, there needs to be a more broad-based independent committee to select election commissioners. Secondly, there is a problem at the level of the courts also, though the law says that election petitions have to be decided within 6 months. But unfortunately, they are not even decided within 5 years. By and large, election petitions keep pending until the next election takes place, rendering them infructuous. So therefore, we need to set this right. We need to set our judicial system right to ensure that indeed election petitions and disqualification of candidates on the ground of corrupt practices, etc., are in fact decided within 6 months, as the law indeed provides. So therefore, these are, in my view, a few changes. I mean, I'm not giving a very sort of comprehensive talk. Khushbu gave a very, very good, very comprehensive talk about all the gamuts of political funding. And as I said, I greatly benefited from hearing her. So I think I'll stop here, but unfortunately, Ajit, I have to go somewhere. So I may not be here for the question answers.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Prashant. Thank you, and thanks for being, as usual, very, very sharp and fearless and open about your views. You've given actually 2 or 3 suggestions for which are actually positive and can go towards at least partial solution of reducing the influence of money power. Those three actions that you mentioned about electoral bonds and unlimited funding and foreign contributions are troublesome, and they're all in, as you know, in court and the litigation. So thank you very much. You also alluded to the, one of your solutions to the money problem was to shift from first past the post to proportional representation, which is a much bigger and much wider reform. So we are going to straight away go to a person who has actually been on the other side. He's been a regulator of elections and political parties. So I am pleased to introduce and invite our next speaker, Mr. J.S. Saharia, who has been a very distinguished civil servant. He's from the 1978 IAS batch, having completed an MSc in physics and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. He spent almost 37 years in the government of Maharashtra and retired as chief secretary, which is the highest post in the state. And after that, he was appointed as the state election commissioner, which is an independent body, as Mr. Prashant Bhushan said, which he served with great distinction for 5 years. Again, because of shortage of time, I'm not going to describe all his reforms that he initiated during his term. But he's currently also chairman of a body called ISHAD, Institute for Social and Human Awakening and Development, which is actually working at the grassroots level for electoral reforms and all these related concepts that we are discussing today. So I welcome you, and over to you, Mr. Saharia.
Thank you, Ajit. And good evening to everybody present in today's webinar. I have a small presentation which I'll request Anas to kindly share with everybody. I'll be speaking primarily on the basis of my experience of 5 years as a state election commissioner of Maharashtra. My experience was that the good people are just not willing to contest the elections, be it the Gram Panchayat or be it the parliament. And the money plays the biggest role. The good people, it was seen by me that only the people who have got money or who have got the legacy of political background or muscle power, they are only contesting the elections. The reasons are very obvious. I don't have to go into that. I'll come to these, my recommendations a little later. I'll just quickly mention about the dynamics of the local body elections, which I personally feel are not known to many people. And this will give an insight as to the complexity of the problems at the grassroots level. As all of you are aware, the historic amendments 73rd and 74th were made in 1992 to give the constitutional status to the local self-governments in our country. And two major decisions as part of these two amendments were minimum 33% reservation for women, which has not been done even at the level of the parliament in our country as yet, and in many countries worldwide. And independent state election commissions in each state, which are at par with the Election Commission of India. So in our country today, we have two election commissions. One is the Election Commission of India, and the other is the State Election Commission. Both are at par. Both have the same powers, but the domains are different. Next slide, please. Now I'll just give an example as to how the local elections are voluminous, complex, and intense. I'll give the example of Maharashtra. This can be multiplied for the whole country. The percentages practically remain the same. Maharashtra has got 9 crore voters approximately, and these 9 crore voters elect 48 members for parliament, 288 members for the legislative assembly, and nearly 300,000 members for the local bodies. Next. Now, what are the local bodies? We have adopted the 73rd and 74th amendment. We have adopted the system of 3-tier of governance. We have municipal corporation, municipal councils, and Nagar Panchayat. And for the rural area, we have Zilla Parishad, Panchayat Samiti, and village panchayats. In Maharashtra, we have nearly 28,000 Gram Panchayat and the members of the Gram Panchayat vary from 8 to 18. And we have different numbers of other local bodies. So nearly 28,780 local bodies are there in Maharashtra, through which nearly 300,000 members are elected every 5 years, as against 48 in parliament and only 288 in the assembly. This itself indicates what is the volume, what is the complexity, and what is the intensity. Because in a village panchayat or Zilla Parishad, the Panchayat Samiti, the voter base for one seat is very small. Everybody knows everybody. The election is extremely intense. Next. Yeah. Now, I'll just very briefly mention what is the financing allowed for the candidates. Now, member of parliaments, we have got 48 in Maharashtra. The 77 lakhs is the 59 to 77 lakhs is the limit prescribed by the Election Commission of India. Now, if we say 10 candidates per seat and everybody is allowed to spend 77 lakhs, then about 370 crores is allowed to be spent in the elections by the candidates in Maharashtra. For the MLA elections, 864. As against that, in the local government elections, though the limits are so small as 50,000 to 10 lakhs, since the number of elected representatives is large, the amount comes to about 28,000 crores. And this is not the expenditure which the Election Commission conducts, incurs, or the state incurs. This is the expenditure which the candidates are allowed to spend. Next, please. Now, we got a study done when I was the election commissioner through the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. And we found that average spending by the candidates is 4 times. In some cases, it exceeded 6.2 times. The same has been shown by some other researchers also, like Kapoor and Vaishnav, Jorkman and Witsow. Next. Now, I'll just quickly mention some of the things which we try to do in Maharashtra. We said that daily filing of expenditure, and we made it compulsory, and this was through mobile application, and we made it a must. We publicly displayed the financial and the criminal backgrounds of every candidate, of every contesting candidate in advance. They were shown not only on the internet, but on the main crossings of the town and the villages. They were displayed. They were displayed outside the polling stations. We also ensured filing of the nomination papers with the help of computers. So we have the data of all the 30 lakh for 300,000 seats, nearly 30 lakh candidates filed their nomination papers. We have the data and affidavit of all these people with us. Then we try to give nota some strength, that wherever the nota got more strength, that election will be countermanded and the fresh election will be held. We also did one very important thing, that was deregistration of political parties. Maharashtra, for local elections, we have a system of registration and deregistration of political parties. And we deregistered political parties when they failed to follow the financial discipline propounded by us. This gave us some strength, or this gave us some success in controlling the expenditure by the political parties. Next. Yeah. Now, from my experience, I find that the 2 problems in the local body elections are there. That is the mindset of the state governments and the other stakeholders. They do not treat local governments as the independent government at the 3rd level. Still, in spite of more than 25 years of constitutional amendment, they don't treat as the independent constitutional government at the local level. Similarly, the state election commissions are not treated at par with ECI. This is, I think, a problem of the mindset which has to be tackled very, very aggressively. And second area is that unfortunately, very little research has been conducted and very little knowledge has been created as far as the local bodies in our country are concerned. If we look at the country as such, in Maharashtra, we have 300,000 elected representatives in the local bodies. In the whole country, it is nearly 3 million. Now, if 30 lakh elected representatives every 5 years, it's a huge social revolution which is undergoing in the country. With 33% reservation for women, it's a great social revolution, but somehow it has escaped the attention of the researchers, universities, and other think tanks, etc. Next. Yeah. Now, I personally feel if we have to reduce the menace of the money, we have to. I mean, there can be two different views. One was suggested that there should be public financing, etc., etc. There are arguments for that, but I personally feel the value attached to the money in the elections must be reduced. Why the candidates with good election is not should not be treated as an office of profit. An elected representative should be chosen on the basis of his social work, his charitable work, his standing in the society. Not just because he has got a lot of money, he is coming from a political family, he is coming with muscle power, he becomes a candidate. That paradigm has to change. And therefore, we must devise some more parameters for those who can file their nomination papers. Only good candidates with proven social, cultural, charitable work background must be allowed to contest the elections. Then, today we have no limit on the terms of an elected representative. Some limit must be prescribed. Three terms or 2 terms or 4 terms must be prescribed. It is not. It's not my personal property that I remain elected representative for 5 years, for 5 terms or 6 terms, maximum 3 terms, and there should be some cooling off. After the first 2 terms, there has to be cooling off period for a minimum 5 years. Then only you can contest again. Today it has become it's a totally free arena. A man with the money can continue to remain an elected representative and continue to ensure that the policies are made according to his desire. And another thing which I personally feel, that declaration of assets before and after holding the office of the elected representative. Today we have a system that a candidate has to file his declare his assets at the time of contesting the elections, but not when he leaves the office. Now, this should be declared, and there should be a mechanism by which, if the disproportionate assets are found, his action should be taken against him. This can be done by the Election Commission, or some other body can be created for that. It's a little difficult area in which we have to work, because if the Gram Panchayat level, if you look at it, it's totally different dynamics than the parliament. And therefore, until unless we reduce the value of money in the election process, I don't think we can achieve any great milestones in the entire process. I think I'll end at this.
Yeah.
With these remarks, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Saharia. Very crisp, very insightful. In fact, very specific suggestions from you, and I'm really happy because they come from your own experience and having had implemented some of them. So we'll come back to some of these points, but we need to move on because of time. So I'm now happy to welcome our next speaker, Professor Rahul Verma. He is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research and also a visiting assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, Ashoka University. And his research interests include voting behavior, party politics, political violence, and media. He's a regular columnist for various news platforms. He has also co-authored a book with Mr. Pradeep Chibber called Ideology and Identity, The Changing Party Systems of India. And he is a PhD in political science from the University of California, Berkeley, and where his doctoral dissertation actually examined why do some political families flourish and others decline. So welcome to you, and over to you, Mr. Verma. Again, request to confine your comments to about 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit and ADR and IDR for inviting me to this Wonderful conversation. I have learned from my previous speakers a lot. And you have to pardon me because I think my age and experience is half of what many of my erstwhile speakers have, seen happening in the world of politics and Indian society and other things. So I will, one, uh, make certain comments as an academic, and to some of my work, research work. So on a couple of things, so I'm going to basically confine my comments on 4 points. First, I'm basically going to talk about the consensus that we all have, right? Which is basically money is not always bad. You need money in politics. Without money, politics can't be run. Two, all countries in this world have basically some sort of regulatory framework to control money in politics. But as Professor Gowda mentioned, many of these reforms have well intentioned, and even your note suggested that it had led to counterproductive results. Those are basically two consensus we have. And the reason I think, despite that consensus, we have a puzzle in Indian politics. And I'll be contrarian for a moment, which is, why should I be worried about money in Indian politics? Half of Indian elected politicians don't get nominated in the next election. And even those who get nominated, half of them lose election. Second, as Mr. Saharia also quoted some of the research, Brockman has showed, and many of us know, the politician who's richest and the politician who spends maximum money is not likely to win election most of the time, right? So what is this all worry about? If money is not dictating the outcome of elections, parties in India lose often, right? So if they're not dictating electoral outcomes, why are we worried? We are worried for one reason: where is this money coming from? And is it tying our politician to certain things, that they have to do certain things to basically pay that money back? The second issue related to this money business in politics is that it's prevalent at every level. So local level, even Supreme Court bar election, Prashant Bhushan would be able to point out, no parties contest there. Even there's, or press club, Manish Chibber is sitting here. Whenever the press club elections must be happening, some sort of give and take must be happening, right? So anywhere where game of election and contestation is going to be involved, resources are going to be mobilized, and for those resources you will always need money. I think what we are not doing, and everyone offered one or two solutions, and as if those solutions, and this is, I think, lies at the heart of the problem, whatever solution we are picking, we think that solution is going to solve everything. So for example, if you look at and Professor Gowda is like one of my favorite persons, so I'm not picking on him. But like, he mentioned of state funding of election, and in the last slide, he basically said this will also solve the problem of criminal politician. This will also take care of every other thing, right? Or PR system. This will solve all. So we offer a solution without even trying it. We have not tried it. We don't know what the outcome of that solution would be, but we present any solution as if that is the Rambar, will solve everything. Now, that's not going to happen. The reason is that you have to understand, the political financing is not just the problem. The problem is also centralization of parties. The problem is also that Indian parties have become centralized and dynastic. Most parties are controlled by single families. Why do these families are interested in controlling these parties? Because there is some money involved in it, right? And so from top to bottom, and you have to also know, uh, and we all think of solutions basically from wherever we come, right? So Prashant Bhushan is going to basically look at the Supreme Court and laws as basically solving all problems, or and this is like, this happens, right? And Saharia ji, and I've been hearing a lot of things about him, he will basically think that the state and bureaucracy can basically come up with regulatory mechanisms that can solve the problem. No, we won't be able to solve the problem. The reason is, and as the first speaker rightly mentioned, we have to think of the context. The Indian context, basically what we have weak institutions. From Supreme Court to state election commissions, we have lots of weak institutions. Second, we have a problem where in our political culture, basically politician with money is not considered bad. he or she is only considered bad if he's making too much of money, right? And the problem is not that politicians is taking money from contractors and corporates, or parties are taking that money. The problem is that this money is being distributed during election, so even people are taking money. And if you do research during these local elections, people don't have any problem going to parties hosted by these candidates. Of course, I'm like, these people, like, voters take money and then they vote any way they want, because voting is largely secret and you don't find out who voted for whom. And it has become a game of poker where if you don't put the money, you are certainly not going to be competitive. So when you put the money, only then game begins. So everyone is putting money. So the problem is we have weak institution in a political culture where money is not basically seen bad, or criminals are not seen bad. Because if that was the thing between 2002, since when like ADR's fabulous efforts, and now we have lots of data, both we know that number of criminal MPs and candidates are increasing. We know median wealth of candidates is rising. We know members with business connections are rising in the parliament. We know that members with family connections are rising in every sphere of politics. So we have to understand what the problem is. And the third problem, which is basically a problem of developing countries like India, state means a lot of things to a lot of people, right? The capture of state matters. Why do you think good people don't participate in politics and bad people are ready to do anything to gain power? Because at the end of the day, power matters in this society. Whoever holds the power decides what is going to happen in this society. And there is a reason why you see, like, in 70 years of our democracy, despite so many parties coming in and going, there is a structural hold of certain communities on political power. Of course, there has been changes. And like in 70 years, as a democracy, we have made a lot of progress. As a society, we have made a lot of progress. But there are also certain sticking things. So unless you start thinking of these solutions from a holistic perspective, and every time basically pick one problem and say, I have a solution and this will solve the problem. No, it won't solve the problem. In UP, where I did my doctoral dissertation, there are more than 1,000 political families that have been contesting. And some 300 political families have been basically contesting at the top level. Some 100 have been in power since independence at the local level. So they, of course, lose election here and there. But what are the factors that support them to retain power? The political economy networks, what I call them networks of power. Basically, they own a very different kind of business, right? They invest in a very different kind of thing. So you bring in any law at the local level that will be subverted to basically keep certain people in politics. And so let me come to basically the final part. What could be the solution? The solution, one, it should not be, oh, here is a part of the problem and I have a solution. No, it will get subverted. You have to think what the entire problem is. So you have the problem of opaque political finance regime. You have a problem of centralized political parties. You have problem of weak institution. You have a problem of political culture. You have a problem where state dominates every sphere of life, right? And so politics is going to be a game of powerful people. And voters, like, at the end of the day, politics is also about contest of ideas, right? And so basically, parties are not going to choose people who are clean and nice. They are in the difference between NGOs and parties are in the game to capture power, right? So parties are going to choose people who are going to help them to capture power. They could be clean people, but then there has to be certain ideological elements associated with those things. And basically, to get that end, they are going to do most possible things. And I don't want to be sound cynical, so let me come to the solution. And I'll take only 1.5 minutes to make. One, we need to have basically a big architecture of what the problem is, and and then we should think about what should be the holistic reform, not just political finance or criminality, or I will put posters here and inform how many criminal candidates are contesting. Voters in my constituency know who's the criminal. They know more than what has been filed in the affidavit, right? They know how many crores they have been. So so information is not the problem. We need to first understand this. So there has to be one holistic picture to the solution, and two, these solutions need to be tried out. We have 28, 29 states. If you think political funding is going to work, why not try in one state and see what result is it going to lead? Why do you want to basically go like entire nation of more than 1 billion people go through one reform and then we figure out it didn't work, have led to unintended consequences and led us in the opposite direction? If you have 5 solutions, just try them out in 5 different states and let's figure out whether any of them are going to work or not. So thank you again, and sorry for being contrarian on some of those things, but I hope my points were useful.
Thanks very much, Professor Rahul Verma. Very provocative, very direct, and I guess you brought some very good points, especially in a large and complex democracy, the experimentation laboratory approach and a more holistic approach. So very good. So let me just quickly go through our final speaker for today, Mr. Manish Chibbar. He is a consulting editor with India Ahead News. He was editor, investigation and special projects at The Print. He's one of India's top legal, political and governance reporters and has worked at the Tribune, Hindustan Times, Indian Express and DNA. Has won several awards, including the Ramnath Goenka, the most prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism and the National Law Day Award. So over to you, Mr. Chibbar, and this is the final speaker. So again, request you to confine your comments, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for discussion. Thank you. Over to you.
Many thanks, Ajit. I'll be very quick because I think all of you have said whatever I had to say. But since I've been invited, so I'll just stick to certain issues that I've quickly jotted down. Immediately after presenting the budget of 2017, the late Arun Jaitley, who was then the finance minister, he told many of us that electoral bonds is going to be a solution for the lack of transparency in political funding in this state, in the country. He also used to tell us that जो आप लोग हर समय you keep on talking about कहाँ से आ रहा है और कहाँ जा रहा है, it will sort out that issue also. So let me take some names and unfortunately Mr. Jaitley is no longer with us. As per an affidavit filed by the Election Commission in the Supreme Court of India, where ADR has filed a petition questioning the legality and constitutionality of the electoral bonds. So Election Commission, which incidentally has been opposing electoral bonds, it cited some names. And those names were Sabse Badi Party, Rashtriya Peace Party, Hindustan Action Party, Bharat Ki Lok Zimmedar Party, and Right to Recall Party. These are just some of the names out of the 70 odd names of unrecognized political parties which had received some funding by way of electoral bonds. Under the law, they are not supposed to receive that money because there are very strict laws insofar as who can and who cannot get money through this, these electoral bonds. It also transpired that out of these names, 3 did not even have the addresses, and when the Election Commission tried to find out their whereabouts, so they were not present at the addresses that they had given while receiving these electoral bonds. Nothing was heard thereafter. Nobody knows what happened to that, whether Election Commission conducted an inquiry or not. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court also has been, allowing repeated sales of electoral bonds without deciding on the issue, and which I think hits out at it's a very big threat to democracy in this country, and that is the legality of these bonds. In one of the earlier hearings, I remember the Supreme Court said, and it asked the Union of India that are you aware some of these funds may actually be used for terror funding and violent protests against the Union of India and the government of India. And it asked the Union of India to come back with its response. Nobody knows what happened to that response. And like most things that have been happening in these days, a fait accompli is being granted, and we don't know till when the Supreme Court is continuing to allow these funds to be collected. I have often, felt that one of the best ways for an Indian and to turn his black money into white money is to form a political party, and there are reasons for that. Till we had the electoral bonds, most political parties, they used to, because they are supposed to file annual statements of expenditure as well as income. So most political parties, they would say that majority of our funds have come from unnamed sources, that is beyond less than the prescribed limit people gave us in cash. Very few political parties had actually, they said that we have received funds from so and such sources. Then came, in 2017 and late 2016 and early 2017, the Election Commission decided that we need to do something about this growth of these political parties. So it decided that it needed more powers, which the Union of India and the Parliament were not ready to grant it, because under the existing laws, the Election Commission, it can register a political party, it can recognize a political party, it cannot de-recognize a political party. So they came up with this novel solution, and that was to deregister a political party. By deregistering a political party, what basically they wanted to do was that stop money coming to these political parties and take them out of the purview of the exemption that the Income Tax Act granted them. When I was in the Indian Express, we did a series on these political parties, and there were about 350 odd political parties. In 2020 January, so I went back to the Election Commission. I started looking at data, and I found that the number of political parties had actually gone up. So today, while hearing my speakers, I was also looking at the latest data. So as of 23rd of September, India has 8 national political parties, 67 state political parties, and almost 2,800 registered unrecognized state parties. When in January of last year, when I was looking at the same data, the number of unregistered, unrecognized political parties was about 2,500. So that means 300 more political parties or people have decided to form political parties. Why do these political people want to, form political parties? From where do they get the money to form these political parties? What is their end game? Most of us, we realize this because, as I said, the best way in India to turn your black money into white could be to form a political party. The Supreme Court, as I said, has been sitting on the issue of legality of political funding, and it has done precious little. Prashant is, I think he has left us. He's been representing some people. ADR is there, and every time a fresh scheme of political this electoral bonds it is floated. They send us a press release. This is the 17th time or the 18th time. But unfortunately, Supreme Court, which is the guardian of the Constitution, it has to ensure a level playing field. It has not been doing its job properly. And somebody spoke about, the fact that India, we spend a lot of money on elections. So I was also looking at data that the 2019 elections, India, had it was the most expensive elections in the world. So we if you look at the nomination forms of our candidates, they also have to file their statements about assets and liabilities. If you look at them, most of these people who are expected to spend between 50 to 79 lakhs in a Lok Sabha election, most of them they don't show that they have a proper job or even a proper business interest from where they are making their money. But election after election, their assets have gone up. The assets of their family members, they go up. So somebody needs to find out or figure out where this money is coming from, and why isn't the election commission making any noise about that? Prashant ji, he did speak about the fact that in recent times we have had facing this problem of having election commissioners and people in the election commission who don't inspire too much confidence because of various factors. So I think during the question and answer, somebody will talk about that. Election commissioners, when the election commission also talks about electoral bonds and campaign finances. Several years ago, I attended a conference in Vigyan Bhavan where this topic was discussed. And the surprising part was most political parties, barring, if I remember correctly, the left, everybody said we don't need to have funding by the state exchequer of our elections. There is no need to have a separate fund to contest elections or to give money to political parties to contest elections. The system that we have in place right now is very well. It's working fine. And the problem, I don't know if Professor Gowda is still here. The problem, as I see it, that most of our political parties, they have one view when they are in a power, and they have a entirely different view when they are out of power. ED and IT, I think Professor Gowda, he was referring to the power that they have. But somebody needs to inform everybody which was the government which took ED and ED out of the purview of the RTI. So it was the UPA government. So the problem is when you are in power, you have a different set of rules. When you are out of power, you have a completely diametrically opposite set of rules. I have covered elections in the 2009 Assembly Lok Sabha elections. I went to Ludhiana, from where Manish Tiwari was contesting as the Congress candidate. Later, he went on to become the Union Information and Broadcasting Minister. One of his biggest complaints was, सारे मीडिया वाले मेरे से पैसा मांगते हैं. And that is not for publishing advertisements, that was for publishing his news. And obviously, most of that money was not going to be by way of checks. It was going to be by way of through cash. And I also realized, because I started looking at the campaign statements or the expenditure statements of various candidates. So if in India, if you want to hold a marriage, you should always hand out your contract to politicians, because they get the lowest per capita cost for chairs, tambu, and all these paraphernalia during elections. 50 paisa per chair. It's a joke, the other day in our society, and I live in Delhi, so we had the meeting of the general body meeting, and we paid about I think 15 rupees per chair, and these people, they still get it for 50 paisa. So it's a steal. I think all of us need to get into politics. People, and I'm just going to quickly, I see Ajit making sending me a signal. So people talk about that, why do these political parties, why do people when you are in power, you get a lot more. When you are out of power, you suddenly, the tap runs dry. So the reason obviously is because you are in a position to help these business people and the vested interests who are your way into power, and when you come into power, you find a way to return the favor. But the biggest problem right now that we are facing is that we seem to have lost, and the election commission also seems to have lost its way. It is not being the poll regulator that we looked up to. It's the same way that we talk about our police. Since I follow the law, so I've grown up hearing this. Whenever we had a problem, we used to say, police ko bata denge, and the cops will take care of it. Now, neither the cops nor the election commission is taking care, and they, unfortunately, even the Supreme Court is allowing this fait accompli by way of this continuous sale of electoral bonds and various other schemes. It's not just limited to electoral bonds. Prashant ji talked about the 3 cases that they had filed. And we expected the Supreme Court to be much more vigorous and much more strict in, applying the standards that the Constitution laid for our political parties. Unfortunately, it's not done so. So I hope, we can find some answers to these, and we need to find these answers very quickly, because time is not, we don't have the, liberty of holding on to these for too long. So I think rest I'll leave it to my esteemed co-panelists.
Thank you, Manish Shibbar. Sorry to rush you a little bit, but I do want to get a few minutes of discussion. So, with your permission, straight away I'm going to ask questions to some. Ms. Khushbu Agrawal, I'll ask this question because you have a global vantage. We've had 2 or 3 actually specific suggestions, starting with public funding of elections as a possible solution. Then we have had a proposal to switch from first past the post, which is what we inherited from the British, to a proportional representation, sort of like the German system. And Prashant Bhushan actually said how to modify it a little bit so that you give 2 votes. Just very quickly and very briefly, do you see any promise in these 2 contributing towards decreasing the influence of money power on politics or elections? Very briefly, in your experience of other countries.
Public funding actually is quite common than we think. 70% of the countries globally, they have some sort of public funding. Of course, the manner in which it's distributed and allocated varies from country to country. And there's, of course, there's a long debate on which mechanism is best to make sure that, again, public funding doesn't become another source of discrimination and unleveling the playing field for political parties. For instance, the allocation criteria sometimes is how much votes political parties received in last elections, right? So obviously, again, it benefits the larger parties. Of course, there are also countries where it is distributed equally. And then there are some countries in which it is distributed based on how much votes the parties will actually receive in the forthcoming elections. And this happens that the money is refunded to the political parties based on the reports that they give. So it is all, it is practiced in many, many countries around the world, as long as it works. Again, but public funding should not be another instrument to discriminate against. And I think the bottom line, again, for me, is really the implementation of it, on how the allocation is done, how the distribution is done, and how eventually the fact that how public funding is spent is monitored and evaluated. And again, we also at International IDEA, we do a lot of study on gender-targeted public funding, on how public funding can actually be used to promote candidacies of women, on how you can tie the allocation of public funding to the gender equality provisions in political parties, or how many candidates they have fielded, or how many candidates actually get elected. So these are things we actually support, but of course it is again country specific, depending on where it is implemented.
Let me just go to Professor Gowda, because he proposed it and he's also actually tabled the bill in Parliament as a private member bill. So Professor Gowda, you heard that 70% of the countries, so that's a very positive sign. But some of us are concerned that what will happen is this money will be on the table and the money under the table will continue to flow. So this is not going to eliminate the the unaccounted money. How do we take care of that problem? Have you thought about that?
Yes. Actually, well, I'm not suggesting that this solution is going to solve that problem. What it does is it provides access to sufficient resources for competitors to pose a credible challenge to the deep-pocketed ruling party, whatever the case may be. And that's all we need. We need ways for credible challengers to to mount a campaign which the people are willing to give accord a certain amount of respect to. And if the other side spends 100 times more, you can still defeat them, as long as people consider you a serious candidate. That threshold level of expenditure is currently more than what is allowed by the law, the 70 lakhs.
Okay.
And therefore, if you want to follow the rules, you're not going to go anywhere near parliament in the current circumstance. So let's fix it. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that,
One second. One could possibly cap the amount that any single party gets. In which case, this huge disparity, this huge amount of excess resource that's going to be spent in addition. These are all fine tuning. I appreciate Rahul's point that I was offering a panacea for everything. It's not the case. I'm trying to squeeze in bullet points in favor of my solutions. That's all. We have to go much deeper into these.
Let me go to Mr. Rahul Verma. Since you said, I think I heard you say that this PR, switching to PR is possibly a step in a positive, good direction. But
no, I don't have, unlike other people, I don't have solution to things. As an academic, I can only think
but
about.
Do you have any view that going
No, I think PR? Like what, so one, we have to temper down our expectations. Every time when we put forward a solution, don't put it as if it is going to solve everything. So now I like Rajeev Gowda's point, right? Basically, think about this. Any solution, can it change the status quo from where we are in positive direction for a bit? And then basically fine tune it. Rather than saying, I have a solution, and we all are pushing our favorite solution and inflicting our favorite solution on everybody. That's what we need to basically be guarded about.
So we'll be less impatient, but Mr. Saharia, you had 2 or 3 specific suggestions. One was term limits. I think not. I see the politician shaking his head. So can you tell us about this term limit solution?
No, I personally feel this is democracy means everybody should get a chance. Now 90% of the people, 95% people are not getting a chance to contest the election at all. They just can't contest. We have made this thing so complicated. You have to have so much money. You have to have so much muscle power. You must have so much freebie. A common man, none of us can think of contesting the elections. Rajeev Gowda sahab became of Rajya Sabha because he must have been chosen, not Lok Sabha. It's just not possible. Number one. Number two, why a man from a political family or who has become a member of parliament should continue to remain a member of parliament for 40 years? Why? Wisdom does not lie anywhere else. In the cricket associations, the Honorable Supreme Court has defined the limits of terms. An office bearer, a person can remain an office bearer for 3 terms maximum. And after 2 terms, there has to be cooling off period. So same principle should be borrowed here. Why not? Why X family should continue the whole thing? No, we'll have the feudal system. Some Yadav, his children are ruling the state. They are going back to the old system. This is what has degenerated.
And do you think this 33% reservation, the women's reservation, is that antidote, at least partly, to the money power problem? I think we may have maybe I'll go to Manish Shibar. We'll come. The one thing which was not discussed today is that can you hear me, Manish Shibar? You're on mute.
I just unmuted myself.
Yeah.
I
So
can hear you.
one thing that was not discussed today is that we keep saying we need more transparency in electoral bonds. So I'm going to ask you a provocative question. I am told that it's not just the receiving, that is the political parties who want anonymity and opacity. It's also the donors. They don't want to be, the sunshine to be shining. So are you aware of this this aspect of this problem, that there are people, because the nexus is between quid pro quo. So there are a lot of people who may be against this idea of transparency in funding from the donor side. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true, but this system has existed for so many years. Earlier, when we did not have the electoral bonds, people used to give cash and even make other kinds of offerings to the to political parties under the table. Similarly, right now, what is happening is in the US, for example, the great shining example of how democracy works. So there's a limit on how much a person can give. So body corporates or big corporations, they get they pay for each of their employees, and then that is seen as a donation, and it falls under the. So similarly, law is we make laws for people who will choose to follow those laws. In Indian politics, we have seen so very often that you have a law, and before the law is it receives presidential assent and is notified, you have people ready with a flaw in that law and how to breach that law. So I have heard, I know big industrialists, for example. I was touring Punjab the other day. There's already this demand, because you might have heard, and Captain Amrinder Singh, he's walked out of the Congress, and now he's threatening to. He's already added to the number of political parties in this country. So the big problem is that he was the chief minister and he was supposed to backroll the election from the Congress. Now you have a new chief minister. About a month or so before the code kicks in. So many of the business people in Ludhiana area who are big donors to whichever party is in power. So I was talking to them, and their problem is Amrinder ko के साथ हमारा बात हो गया था, अब नए वाले के साथ दोबारा से बात करना पड़ेगा. So they they now, and that is not just limited to Punjab, it is true of every state. And till you have some system in place, I don't know what that system will be.
Rajeev, Gowda, you mentioned in one of the slides ED, the rate, Enforcement Directorate and all that, the instruments of state. So do you think that is an additional factor that, now nobody wants to donate openly and transparently because they fear some retribution will be done? If is that a possibility?
I think you remember Tagore's poem, where the mind is without fear. That's not today's India. Okay, everybody's mind is filled with fear, especially of ED and IT and things like that. And Manish Bhai had basically criticized us for for various things under the UPA. But the basic point is the BJP was able to raise, practically more funds.
I'm not going to let this go into
without fear of ED reprisal than is possible today for any political party. I mean, it's a very, very different environment. It's not democratic at all, I'm afraid. That's the real challenge. Yeah, it's a misuse of institutions.
Yeah, Mr. Saharia, I think your connection got cut, but very briefly, you could touch upon this 33% reservation for women. Do you think that is hopefully contributing towards reducing influence of money power, or that's not a relevant factor?
No, it is a very, very important factor. It will take some more time.
And why is that? What does women's reservation do towards reducing the influence?
To get the full fruits of this amendment will take some more time, because the tendency of the same, the men ruling through the women, Sarpanch Pati, continues in our country. The chief ministership is being done by proxy. No, this will take some time. The women will come out, maybe in the 10 years time, will come out of the shell and start asserting for their rights, which they have got constitutionally. It's a great, great step. And I personally feel it should be implemented in the parliament and the state assembly without delay. But what we have discussed will never be done easily.
This bill has been pending in parliament for more than 40 years. So I'm just going to ask last two questions, if with your permission, because we need to wrap up. So second last question to Mr. Rahul Verma and last one to Ms. Khushbu Agrawal. So Rahul Verma, you said a lot about power, and that was a very, very insightful. You said this is people who are powerful and so on. And in Marathi, we say "satte se rajkaran," politics of power. So how do we? I think the medium-term reform is to reduce the premium of power, getting to state control. Getting to run the state has so much premium. So, if we genuinely, like Mr. Saharia said, genuine decentralization of power all the way to the local government, if that had happened, perhaps this premium of power would have gone down. For example, in the US, there is no fear of this income tax raid and so on. I don't know. I may be mistaken. But do you have any thoughts on this? How do we reduce the premium of getting to power, whether elected in parliament or state legislatures?
Okay, no, thank you. And in Maharashtra, right, like sugar mills and cooperative societies and district cooperative banks, the amount of control they have on local politics, including who gets elected as MLAs, and these families, sugar barons, have been controlling Maharashtra politics for at least 70 years. So what I was trying to say through my 10 minutes is: one, don't think of one solution; two, don't think of quick solutions. This is a long haul battle. So yes, but decentralization cannot be answer to everything, right? Think about what debate in the Federalist paper number 10 Hamilton and others were having. Some were worried that if you decentralize too much power, basically people at the local level are going to capture the local state. So all I'm trying to say: one, don't think of quick solution; two, don't romanticize anything; and three, don't overplay things. What is this? And Manish, we have met recently. So why are we so much worried about most expensive election in the world? One, that number has come with some voodoo, we don't know. Even if it is the most expensive election in the world, compared to US, we have 3 times more voters. So
Yeah.
if you compare the 3 times, like divide by 3, we'll have
Yeah.
a fairly okay election. Similarly, parties don't getting deregistered. We have 31 lakh NGOs registered in this country. Our NGOs don't get used to launder money. So if we start painting the picture that elections में bad लोग contest करते हैं, politicians corrupt होते हैं, and parties are only to launder money, this is a political problem. You need a political solution. And so first you have to understand what is politics and what is power game in this country. Otherwise, we'll basically, wander around the problem.
I think Mr. Rajeev also pointed out that actual number is in the context of our size of the economy and population is not that big. So I'm going to finally give the final question to Ms. Khushbu. This is a little bit a slightly different question. In India, all the people who campaign for elections, they promise a lot of freebies. Free electricity or free this and free that. Nowadays, the new trend is travel tourism. If you elect me, I will give you a package tour to this place and that place, almost like, but if you do the same thing to an individual voter, I'll give you 1,000 rupees and you vote for me, that is a crime. But if I do wholesale bribery, it's okay. That's called election promises, which are often not kept. So there is some kind of free speech I think in the sort of the other democracy, USA, there are a lot of free speech advocates who any curtailment on spending money power, they look at it as if it's a constraint on free speech. But they're also, of course, so what is the global view on this? That while you can't curtail free speech, but at the same time you allow wholesale bribery, tell the voters all kinds of promises.
Yeah.
But individually, you can't buy votes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to. We've been talking a lot about the U.S. and in U.S. actually, donations are considered part of free speech, and that was the reason that any limits on donations was removed from U.S. politics, because the argument was voters should be able to vote as much, donate as much as they want because it's part of their free speech. And at the same time, you're talking about vote buying in India, and I was also preparing myself when before coming to this presentation today, and I was listening to Milav Vaishnav's presentation where he was talking about vote buying. So in countries like India, where there is secret ballot, you can't actually assign the name vote buying because the cost of not promising is higher than actually promising. So because there is no legal repercussions. Globally, if you have to ask me, 92% of the countries actually explicitly ban any forms of vote buying. So you can't actually buy votes. You can't give individual, support, even though it may be secret ballot. But in case of India, it is very difficult also to track. Like, for example, the parties that happen, the massive parties that happen at the local levels or whatever levels you ask for, or, drinks, let's say. It's very informal, but it happens. Or if I get elected, I will provide you with so and so benefits. So it is very, very pervasive, but at the same time, it is not in the legal purview. So, and how do you monitor that? I think the monitoring is a problem. And we have been talking about the size of the population size of India and the massive electorates that we are dealing with. So it's no joke. And how do you actually monitor these small supports that are provided to people really, really at the local levels? It's absolutely critical. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Khushbu Agrawal. So thanks to all the panelists, Khushbu Agrawal, Rajeev Gowda, Prashant Bhushan, Mr. Saharia, Rahul Verma, and Manish Chibber. A wonderful discussion. We went over time a bit, but I think it was well worth spending that time. Thanks to all the participants. Thanks to the team ADR who helped put this up. And I wish you all a good evening, good day, and hope to see you more often in this debate. As Mr. Rahul Verma said, any incremental progress is welcome. So we should constantly keep pushing. So on that note, I think I would like to declare this webinar closed, and thank you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Good night.